So I think we'll get started. Let me welcome everyone. Encourage you. Oh, thank you. Does that work?
It'll happen. There we go.
Very good. If I could encourage everyone to take a seat, we'll get started. If I could encourage everyone to take a seat, we will get started. Well, a very good evening to everyone. I'm Jeff Collins, Professor of Early Modern Studies and Chair of Academic Programs at the Bard Graduate Center. And on behalf of all my colleagues, I am delighted to welcome you to this 23rd convocation of the Françoise and Georges Selz Endowed Lectures in 18th and 19th Century French Decorative Arts, Design, and Culture. I extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining us via the internet, via BGC TV, and I invite you to participate by tweeting your comments or questions to Bardgrad Center TV on Twitter. The only caveat, I'm not a Twitter user, I just learned that you have to keep your comments or questions to 140 characters or less, which will be a challenge for some of us, and I actually think all of us in the room should abide by that same restriction. So tonight is the last of this year's series, but just to let you know, we're already planning next year's trio, so keep tuned for future announcements. So as you know, this series, focuses on French arts, but not exclusively on French patrons. And last year, if you'll recall, we had Tobias Locker, who examined how Parisian styles and technologies were taken up and adopted by a Swiss decorative sculptor in the employ of the Prussian king Frederick the Great. His talk was appropriately entitled Paris, Potsdam, Paris, Gilt Bronzes à la Française in Prussia and the Circulation of Knowledge. And it occurred to me that tonight's presentation might be seen as a kind of prequel to that topic, in that it deals with an earlier German monarch, Elector Max Emanuel of Bavaria, whose alliance with the Bourbons against the Habsburgs during the War of Spanish Succession led to his 7-year exile at the court of Louis XIV in Paris, a residence that had a decisive impact on his own artistic patronage and arguably the future course of Bavarian design. Now, our guide to this tonight will be Dr. Max Tillmann, who specializes in the study of the production, collecting, and circulation of 18th century French luxury arts, paintings, furniture, boule furniture, silver, etc. He received an MA from the Courtauld Institute of Art in London and the PhD from the Free University in Berlin. From 2005 to 2008, he was curatorial assistant in the museum department for the state-owned Bavarian palaces in Munich, where he helped organize and catalog several exhibitions. I'll name just a few: 1806, A Crown for Bavaria, done in Munich in 2006, The House of Wittelsbach, and the Middle Kingdom, Munich 2009, André Charles Boulle, A New Style for Europe in Frankfurt 2009, and Baroque Furniture in the Boulle Technique in Munich in 2011. He's currently co-curating an exhibition for the Staatliche Kunsthalle in Karlsruhe on the founder of its painting collection, the Markgrafin Caroline Louisa of Baden. Dr. Tillmann is also responsible for the refurbishment of the princely apartments of the Badenburg, a Baroque pleasure house in the garden of the Nymphenburg Palace. His publications include studies of the Electoral Palace at St. Cloud in a volume edited by Meredith Martin in 2010, on the impact of Boulle furniture at the court of Max Emanuel, in Baroque Furniture in the Boulle Technique, Conservation, Science, and History, Munich 2013, and a study of the formation of the Grand Gallery at Schleißheim Palace near Munich in a forthcoming volume on the Gallery of Charles XI and the Royal Palace at Stockholm. Tonight, as you see, he's going to tell us about Les Derniers Goûts de France, Elector Max Emanuel, and French decorative arts around 1715. Please join me in welcoming Max Tillmann.
Good evening. It's a great honor and pleasure to come to New York and present to you the topic of the derniers goûts de France. I'd like to thank the Bard Center and the Selzes very much for this generous invitation. Maybe I should clarify the title of Elector. It might not be known to everyone. There were 7 electors in the Holy Roman Empire who elected the emperor himself. Very often they were bribed and for many, many years the imperial crown remained in the hands of the Habsburgs. So the Elector is the highest princely rank below the emperor in the Holy Roman Empire, that is Germany at the time. If we want to examine the patronage and collecting of Elector Maximilian of Bavaria, then it will be important to judge these works of art in an appropriate manner, something which a contemporary, namely Voltaire, expressed most pointedly. By way of summarizing, Voltaire put his century's branches of knowledge into order. He said, "Concerning the arts and the science, there is no question, I believe, in tracing the path of the human spirit, in philosophy, rhetoric, poetry, criticism, to mark its progress through painting, sculpture, music, the art of the goldsmith, and in the manufacture of tapestries, looking glasses, gold brocades, and clocks." Voltaire's assumption that the decorative and fine arts deserve to be placed shoulder to shoulder with the classical liberal arts is symptomatic of an awareness of the merits and skills of the artist craftsmen that was typical of the pre-industrial world. This awareness, one might argue, has since been lost in modern times. However, if we are to do full justice to pre-revolutionary art in general or to the patronage of Elector Maximilian in particular, we are bound to revert to this noble manner of making judgments. My approach this evening will be very focused. Of the more than 20 years of the middle phase of Elector Maximilian's reign, first and predominantly as a governor of the Spanish Netherlands, where he held court in Brussels from 1692 to basically 1708, I will especially look now at his activities on French soil between 1708 and 1715, at the time, culturally speaking, the ruling nation of Europe. The political context, as Jeffrey has explained already, was a war of Spanish succession between 1701 and 1715. The Elector sided with the French, that is to say, with the Bourbons, who were his own family. His mother, Henriette Adelaide of Savoy, was the granddaughter of Henri IV, and Maximilian's sister, Marie-Anne Christine, was married to the Grand Dauphin, heir to the French throne. But politically, this alliance wasn't a lucky one. Bavaria and France were severely defeated at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704 and Ramillies in 1706. Max Emanuel was driven from Bavaria and the Spanish Netherlands and became an émigré and an associate of Louis XIV court. In October 1708, Maximilian and his Bavarian court, which numbered approximately 120, fled the allied imperial and British troops and went into exile in France. Feeling kindly with his Bavarian ally, Louis XIV offered political asylum in the ancient royal chateau of Compiègne, which you see in the background. And of course, you know, the French royal family here on the terrace. Compiègne, about 50 miles north of Paris, became Max Emanuel's main residence, where the dispossessed prince installed himself as a sovereign lord and master while waiting for a suitable kingdom to be carved out of Habsburg's territories. Important to mention within the political context is his success that in 1712 he was declared sovereign prince of the Spanish Netherlands by the Spanish king Philip V. But Max Emanuel's rule in the Netherlands was not accepted at the Treaty of Baden in 1714. He was restored the Bavarian lectorship and reluctantly, it has to be said, returned to Munich in 1715. This is the old royal chateau of Compiègne, royal chateau, therefore great reputation. The apartment here that the Elector used is the apartment of Anne d'Autriche. So you have a Baroque ground plan of salle des gardes, antichambre, state bedroom, and cabinets. So he lived there in a very, very modern fashion. Examining Max Emanuel's understanding of art, the cultural background of his childhood is of particular interest. Next to a musical education, humanist and natural science, he was also given an understanding of the practice of arts and crafts. Since Renaissance times, amateurism and the practice of artistic techniques was considered by many princes un passe-temps agréable et honnête, une arme contre l'ennui. Writers on art and humanists even referred to the type of prince as artist and were citing quotes of Pliny, according to which in old Rome, noblemen and even rulers were practicing painting. Castiglione, for example, advises the courtier to cultivate his own personality by practical exercise of the artistic métier. Princely enthusiasm of such a kind was much appreciated by Elector Maximilian I, grandfather of Max Emanuel, who put into the educative instructions of the prince of 1646 the following: "Therefore, it is not against the reputation of a prince, but an adornment and of great utility. It is by any event necessary that he, the prince, has an understanding of architecture, painting, jewelry, fine metal and plasterwork, and further mechanica. He is not only supposed to name one or the other by their terminis technicis or vocabularis artis, but also to make judgments with reason." In that way, the prince developed an approach to art characterized by deepened understanding of the use, application, and function of artifacts. At the same time, the engagement with artistic techniques helped challenging his own creativity. This may explain the astounding self-confidence which characterizes the Elector's occupation with art all through his life. Hence, I will start my presentation with a prominent piece which pinpoints the Elector's inclination for an elaborate mise en scène of his own creativity. This concerns the hardly known ivory reliquary of the Elector, preserved in the Musée de la Visitation à Moulins, the capital of the Bourbonnais in the Auvergne. Of the shape of an ostensory, the oval container of the relic is supported by a slender stem of an equally oval base. The cross on top explains its function of a staurotheca, as a capsule of the relic inside contains a manuscript which reads: "Cette relique de la vraie croix a été donnée par la feu reine d'Angleterre, Henriette de France." While on the other side of the billet is written: "Ce reliquaire a été donné par son Altesse électorale, Monseigneur Maximilien Emanuel, Elector de Bavière, qui l'a fait de ses propres mains en 1712. And, in fact, there are the initials of the maker, M.E., in gold letters on the base. To refer to the Christian significance, it says on the back, "Sola digna tu fuiste fer de mundi victima." You alone were worthy to carry the sacrifice of the world. According to the historic records of the Sisters of Amiens, gathered on the history of the reliquary during the 19th century, a most prominent dynastic context comes to the fore. Queen Henriette Marie of England, daughter of Henri IV, Roi de France, and spouse of Charles I of England, fled with the relic from England to rescue it from the Puritans, if you like. She later presented the relic, namely a splinter of the Holy Cross of Christ, to the Venerable Mother, Madeleine Elisabeth de Chaumont, of the Order of the Visitation Sisters, or you call them also Salesians. The Order of the Visitation Sisters was founded in the early 17th century by Saint Françoise de Sales, Bishop of Geneva, and Saint Jeanne-Françoise de Chantal in 1610 in Nancy. This contemplative women's order aspired a new spirituality for laypersons at the time. Many convents were founded as appropriate educational institutions for young girls of the nobility or the upper bourgeoisie. Madame de Chaumont, highly aristocratic lady whose father had been a close friend of Henri IV, had been a sister of the monastery of Saint-Denis. Then she became superior of Vannes, and finally in 1682 was elected head of the convent of Compiègne. There in Compiègne, the Elector donated his own creation for the most prominent royal relic. During his years in exile, Maximilian proved to be very productive at the turning machine, or lathe, if you like to call it. The French Marshal Villars, for example, had been presented with a snuff box made by the Elector and commented with a sharp tongue that Maximilian had no other occupation left than his mistresses, gambling, and the turning machine. On the other hand, the art of turning had been embraced by the rulers of the Wittelsbach dynasty since the early 16th century. It was considered to be work similar to the creative activity of governing. Be it as it may, the Elector's courtiers, notably his court turner Maximilian Koch, were ordered to purchase a new lathe from Paris in 1708, as well as very often ivory and tortoise shell to be used. In 1711, François Huard was appointed art and iron turner. He created a particularly capable lathe for Max Emanuel, which is dated 1712 and is preserved in the Bavarian National Museum. The machine is fitted with a spindle stock to mount the material, that is the ivory tooth, which rotates, and by the use of cutting tools, you see here, it's actually not complete. The lace would be kind of put here and it rotates, and thereby specific forms could be determined. The way the reliquary dated 1712 was made exhibits a high degree of complexity, which suggests that it was a first creation of the newly acquired machine. The work techniques, which are both challenging and clearly mastered, concern the making of oval shapes instead of the ordinary and easier round forms. Also sophisticated is a technique when the ivory rotates around its own axis. It is made to make movements at the same time, which creates these wavy lines that you find very often on early 18th century ivory objects. Between the rosette and the outer frame, a gilded decoration is visible, drapery. These details are carved and correspond in an appealing manner with the art of turning. We may assume that Max Emanuel was guided by a court artist who was responsible for the carvings. It seems that most importantly, the Elector wanted to create a showpiece in order to prove that he mastered the new machine and to point out his artistic virtuosity. The effort in relation to the donation of the relic was quite substantial, but the courtly public, the acclaim of the courtly public was equally certain. As mentioned, the beneficiary of this particularly personal gift was the Mother Superior of the convent of Compiègne. Perhaps Max Emanuel was on friendly terms with the noble sisters. There it is This context, which may well explain the participation of the ladies in the decoration of the box, the way laurel leaves of silver foil and gold thread frame the relic and are sewn and sequined into the purple silk velvet is actually characteristic of the kind of decorative arts practiced by religious orders. The Elector commissioned a magnificent case to protect the costly piece. It is made of dark brown leather and shows an expressive decoration in silver piqué, that is an ornamentation of small silver nails which were pulled into the soft organic material. The hand of the piqué work, characterized by the interplay of sinuous curves, is similar to the gold piqué of several works in the Munich collection, works of tortoise shell, particularly Max Emanuel's measuring rod. The maker of these piqué works was quite certainly the aforementioned court turner Maximilian Koch, who in 1706 had been sent by the Elector to Paris in order to be trained there by a master named David in the highly fashionable technique of gold piqué. That's a later object that I would attribute to Koch. And here you have detail in terms of the drapery, and just the hand of this master comes out as a German master who has been trained in Paris. And I don't want to paint too much here the black and white terms, but I would like to show you my favorite snuff box from the treasury, which is a very early box acquired by the Elector, and you have here a sort of guilloche decoration of tortoise shell and gold, which comes close actually in its simplicity to Art Deco, to my mind. So a great piece, and of the same shape in ivory, an early 18th century snuff box, which could have been made by Max Emanuel, who, as the sources tell us, often made gifts of small ivory objects. Back in Munich, after 1715, the prince did not lose interest in crafting objects. The travel writer Pierre Bretagne described in 1722 the ambience of Max Emanuel's Grand Cabinet in Nymphenburg Palace, the Elector's summer residence. I'll read it in French because the description is quite neat. Le Grand Cabinet est orné de plusieurs antiques de marbre, de jaspe en buste, d'une belle cheminée de marbre à l'angloise, et d'un tour, the lace, où son Altesse électorale fait à ses heures de loisir, in his hours of leisure, ses beaux ouvrages d'or et d'argent, de nacre de perles, d'écailles de tortue, d'ivoire, qui ont toutes sortes de figures, rondes, ovales, cannelées, torcées, font l'admiration des plus habiles de l'art et des plus grands connaisseurs. Now we spring to the second object that I would like to present to you today. It concerns the two electoral brothers, Joseph Clement and the younger brother, and Max Emanuel himself, in 1713. Max Emanuel, in his function as the head of the Wittelsbach dynasty, decided to make a gift and present his brother with an elaborate garniture of sacred objects. Joseph Clement of Bavaria was made Archbishop of Cologne, Elector of Cologne as well, at the age of 17 in 1688. As did his brother, Joseph Clement allied with France during the war and was forced to flee his residence in Bonn in 1702 and found refuge at the French court. In 1714, the Treaty of Baden restored Joseph Clement back to Cologne, just like his brother. Max Emanuel represented with the gift quasi the father who customarily presented the young newly ordained priest with a chalice within these circles of pure gold. This gesture was most certainly made in order to sweeten the return of Joseph Clement back from Paris to his clerical duties in the not so much appreciated Archdiocese of Cologne. However, the commission of un calice et une patène d'or, a chalice and a paten of gold to the Sieur Germain, sculpteur et orfèvre du roi, would not continue under a lucky star. It was going to turn into a véritable calice d'or affair of 35 years. Joseph Clement, of course, took notice of the important commission, which was being conceived in Paris for his purposes. Beginning with the planning phase of the project in 1713, the presentee was actively involved. Joseph Clement's intention to speed up the project is shown in a letter of the fall of 1715, when Max Emanuel's secretary wrote to the Bavarian envoy in Paris, the Count Monasterol, who supervised the commission. He wrote, Son Altesse électorale de Cologne m'a fort chargé de prier votre Excellence de presser l'orfèvre pour qu'il puisse recevoir ici son calice d'or qu'on fait à Paris. The goldsmith Thomas Germain was considered in his time a nearly universal artist who developed in his works the Rococo style to a degree of the most sensual kind. He was a former pupil of the painter Louis de Boulogne and had won at a very young age a medal of the Academy. He was only 13 when the protection of Louvois enabled him to travel to Italy. That was in 1685, where he spent the first half of his career in Rome. Only in 1706, Germain returned to France. As a tremendously versatile artist, Germain was considered by his son bon sculpteur, bon modeleur, bon dessinateur et bon architecte. The holdings of Germain's library testify an interest for humanities and the artists of the 17th and 18th century, particularly for architects. Germain was a technically skilled artist who not only as a goldsmith, but also as a bronzier and metalsmith created important works of art. Thus, Elector Max Emanuel proved his distinct artistic sense when he decided in anno 1713 to have the golden chalice made by the goldsmith Thomas Germain at Paris. This commission to the promising orfèvre was comprised of a wage for his work called la prix de façon of 18,000 livres, which is a huge sum. And the transfer of 15 gold mark and an advance payment of 3,000 livres. But only on 17th June 1716, Germain received the raw material in gold. Of the same day dates the receipt of the goldsmith on the advance payment. It says, J'ai reçu de Monseigneur le Comte de Monastarol la somme de 3,000 livres à compte de la façon du calice d'or que je fais pour son Altesse électorale de Bavière, 17 juin 1716, qui est le jour que je le commence à travailler. So we know the exact date when it starts. Germain received these 3,000 livres of advance payment for the so-called façon du calice, that is the design of the shape, which comprised the artisanal and intellectual preparations which led to the design, which was finally presented to the commissioner. This happened most certainly during Max Emanuel's sojourn in France. Part of the design are the here identified 3 drawings of 2 chalices and a pattern from a French private collection. The 3 drawings on paper are mounted together on a carton. They are in pen with grey ink and touches of grey and yellow. They are full-scale drawings and colored to suggest the tone of gold. The work testifies Germain's extraordinary talent as a draughtsman. The drawings later belonged to the famous collections of designs from fine metalwork of the Parisian company Audio. They therefore own a secure provenance up to the early 19th century. The chalice shown on the left is, to my mind, the first design created just after 1713, which was rejected. The design to the right, however, was developed in correspondence with the commissioner until 1715, when it was accepted. The chalice on the right can be identified as a realized calice de l'Elector due to the casting molds in lead, which were inventoried in the workshop of Germain's son in 1765. Here you got the inventory. I translate it and commend it a little. 3 hollow molds for the angels. There are 3 angels of the shaft of the chalice for the Elector of Cologne. 1 model for the part above the angel's head. 5 different models for the arms, negative and positive forms. 5 hands, 2 feet. 1 small group of palms, that is the ears of the cup. 19 models and 17 models of brass. Brass was more expensive than lead and could be used more often, therefore the material here is specified. Furthermore, part of the chalice of the Elector, 2 feet, a base for the foot, surface of the foot, 3 low reliefs of the New Testament for the foot, 6 other scenes of the Passion for the fausse coupe. The fausse coupe is the outer cup. There is an inner and an outer cup. The outer one is ornamented and has to be pierced in order to be attached to the foot. The inner cup has to be even and impermeable to prevent the wine from dripping. 2 low reliefs for the paten, 18 models at the bottom. I believe that relates to the total number of the models, but this is not quite certain. In accordance with the sacral function of the objects, both chalices were linked through their iconographic program. This was comprised of a decor in low relief with scenes of the Passion of Christ, added by the ears and the wine representing the celebration of the Mass. The arrangement of ears and wine forms the stem of the first chalice, while they frame the cup of the second design. The second design shows 3 angels which carry the cup like caryatides. The third angel can only be guessed in the outline of the drapery, but its existence is recorded in the inventory. It is also necessary to view the chalice from all sides. This triad of angeled creatures is derived from an antique model of 3 Tillmanns with their lifted arms. It also stands fully in the tradition of France. A forebear of Germain's design is a famed life-size marble group of graces, which Germain Pilon in 1561 created as supporting figures of the urn containing the heart of King Henry II of France. The celestial creatures are own, according to Christian iconography, male features. At the base of the first chalice, there are 2 angels shown with a cartouche depicting Christ on the Mount of Olives, and this reappears on the cup of the second chosen design. These engravings, also the passions that decorate the base, seem to be inspired by engravings of Sébastien Leclerc, which Thomas Germain owned at the time. The base, according to the Munich inventory, was finally fitted with the coat of arms of the Elector of Cologne, of course, either on the front side or on the back side, because there must have been two cartouches. The three drawings for presentation are laid out onto 3 single sheets and were supposed to be sent to the two brothers. The identical scale of both chalices, their structural dependency, and the nearly identical shapes of elements, such as the angels' heads, strongly suggests that the first chalice must be considered to be part of the design and not to come from another context. However, the mounting of the 3 drawings and the addition of the legend might have happened only later, perhaps for the purpose of a publication of Germain's oeuvre. Viewed within the context of such an extraordinarily costly and elaborate commission, the 2 variants seem to be the starting and the end point of an artistic development, which was not only determined by the goldsmith, but very much by the knowledgeable commissioners. Taking into account the taste of the 2 electoral brothers, it is easy to comprehend that the first design of 1713 was rejected due to its architectural structure as being too conservative. Elements such as the massive gedruned zone here, or the sharp contours of the bunch of ears endow the chalice with a noble and rigid appearance that speaks stylistically for the classicist grandeur of about 1700, which was not yet outdated. We may assume that the goldsmith's intention to meet with the decorum of a sacred object and also to correspond with the taste of 2 foreign princes of the Holy Roman Empire, led to the presentation of such stylistic mode. But this added structural design was rejected and transformed in favor of the fluid, continuous shape of the second design. It is the sculptural physique of the accepted chalice here of about 1715, which fully brings out the style of what was known at the time the goût moderne. We call it today the Régence or the early Rococo. The contemporaries spoke of the goût moderne, the new taste. The contours of the 3 the angels and their garments, to my mind, breathe life and lightness. The contour of the 3 figures is in motion, but wonderfully balanced and kept tight at the same time. In this small sculpture, which coins, indeed nearly transcends the shape of the chalice, comes a sensuality to the fore, which is characteristic of the Rococo style. The borders of heaven and earth seem to come close. Viewed in the context of the sacral function, but also as an indication of the rule of the Wittelsbach dynasty in the electorate and Archdiocese of Cologne, the chalice impresses by its representative claim. At the same time, it impresses by its almost unseemly sensual effect. In the execution of such a chalice could have been only realized under the influence of the donor and the presentee. With regards to Germain's oeuvre, the commission seems to have had a formative effect, arguably, through the artistic understanding of the goldsmith, because we are here quite early in 1715. He was not even an artist to the crown at that time. And you see here in 1735, of course, the sculptural method to endow objects with is clearly in fashion 2 or 3 decades later. So this is really cutting edge, if you like. As mentioned, the form of the paten, however, is very functional because it is needed to cover the cup with the wine. The plate is decorated with a scene of Christ and the Doubting Thomas, framed like a tondo with a garland of olive leaves and medaillons. The medaillons depict 4 Christian emblems. The central image might have been executed in low relief. The medaillons may have been cast or engraved as secondary ornaments. The garlands of olive branches were certainly engraved in gold. The great virtuosity of Germain in metal engraving was even eternalized in Voltaire's poem Le vous et le tu. He wrote « Ces plats si chers que Germain a gravés de sa main divine ». As mentioned, the sum of 18,000 livres had been negotiated for making the design of the chalice. 15,000 livres were still to be paid. After 1718, the commission lay in the hands of the new Bavarian envoy in Paris, the Comte d'Albert, who is, by the way, the brother of the well-known Comtesse de Verrue, the very early collector of Watteau, for instance. Comte d'Albert, so Elector was well connected within the French aristocracy, and the poor Comte d'Albert had to take care of the commission. Due to the delay in payment, Germain, on the other hand, had not completed the chalice. This corresponds with a character who in the sources comes across as a self-willed, self-assured, and with regards to the perfection of his works, absolutely uncompromising personality. These traits of character were pointedly shown in the double portrait, beautiful double portrait of the artist and his wife by La Jolière, to my mind. The Comte d'Albert reported in 1729 that despite the shortage of money, courts were always broke, as we know, other pressing debtors further commissions of the Elector, that he did not tire de persécuter le Sieur Germain pour l'engagir à finir, that finally it would be completed. In the meantime, in 1725, the 4 Bavarian sons of Max Emanuel on their grand tour to Paris had visited Germain, now in his studio in the Louvre, to have a look at the chalice. At least at that time, the state was described as being presque achevé, almost completed. Although by now the original beneficiary, Joseph Clement, had died, as well Max Emanuel died in 1726. And the Comte d'Albert came to an agreement with Germain. Another 9,000 livres were paid, but not the whole sum, and Germain stopped again. And this went on up to 1745, when Max Emanuel's son, Charles Albert, was elected Emperor Charles VII. This time the French bribed the other electors. And of course the Munich, now imperial court, was very interested to finally get hold of that beautiful, expensive object. However, it might have been due to the political misery of Charles VII and consequent cash flow difficulties that the commission remained unfinished. Finally, Germain died himself in 1748, and the chalice was inventoried in his workshop with a weight of 13 gold mark, valued 12,457 livres, y compris la façon, the wage included. But of course he died already. At last, Germain's son, François Thomas, equally very gifted, silversmith who continued his father's workshop, completed the chalice until 1751. However, before it was delivered to Germany, François Thomas presented it at court in Fontainebleau. The Duc de Luynes reported that the chalice would do honor to father and son Germain, describing the piece as un ouvrage fort cher, too true. Il est orné de plusieurs médaillons qui représentent différentes circonstances de la passion de notre Seigneur. The Duc de Luynes thought Clement Augustus, now Elector of Cologne, to be the recipient, but his nephew, now the new Elector Max III Joseph of Bavaria, grandson of Max Emanuel, brought the piece to Munich. Apparently, one no longer had the means to make expensive gifts. Hence, it is almost surprising to find the chalice in an entry in the Munich treasury of 1752 that it says, chalice of pure gold of exceedingly beautiful work with its respective paten and a handsome red leather case was delivered. In 70 now a sad end to the story. In 1778 the chalice appeared in the publication of the Munich treasury, but during the reign of the then new Elector Charles Theodore of the Palatine branch, so a new branch comes to Munich, the chalice disappeared after 1785. Its value in gold must have sealed its fate. The history of Germain's gold chalice, therefore, is representative for further famed commissions of Max Emanuel, whose provenance still lie in the dark. I just allude to the beautiful Grand Bureau, Grand Desk in the Louvre, which is a bit of a missing link between the desks of André Charles Boulle and Rococo Bureau Place. At the same time, finally, the Calice d'Or affair is a parable to us how the realization of sophisticated art projects was questioned due to financial difficulties between the courts and their artists, that works remained unfinished or were delivered only after decades, and that once highly esteemed works of art were later sold or even destroyed. Now, just a tiny little paragraph on Max Emanuel to finish my presentation with the lines, Je serais bien aise de voir les derniers goûts de France. I would be very prepared or very satisfied to see the latest French taste, written in a letter to his French mistress, of course, Countess Arco. In 1705, Max Emanuel pinpointed his desire to make French art his favorite choice for the expression of his court. During his sojourn in Paris, Max Emanuel participated in the life of Le Monde, the society who in matters of bon goût, etiquette, and artistic convention served as the highest instance for taste. Within this society, ébénistes and orfèvres enjoyed a reputation equal to a painter and a sculptor. The ébéniste, for instance, it may also be an important marchand mercier, served as a general contractor, bringing together many diverse capacities who worked after the design of a master, but not as subaltern worksmen, but as bronziers and modelers of importance. Such comprehensive commissions were seldomly carried out in Germany, and if so, an architect or a sculptor was responsible for the design. Far away in France from the social control of the Munich court, Max Emanuel indulged in the world of the Parisian salons, where sociability and libertinage, but most importantly taste, spirit, and form consciousness were prevailing. After his return to Bavaria, he appeared melancholic given the loss of the cultural milieu which had become his homeland. In a letter to his lifelong friend, Madame Arco, of 6 July 1715, the prince, who had returned home to Munich, gave testimony to his feelings. Je ne vous montrerai pas grand-chose d'ici. I can't tell you much from here. Je suis toujours à mes maisons de campagne. I'm always in the countryside, in my country houses. Je peux imiter le goût de la France en bâtiments et jardins, mais les habitants ne se changent pas. Let's translate it. I can do what I like, imitate the taste of France in my buildings and gardens. However, the inhabitants won't change. I thank you for your attention.
We all hate to leave Paris now. Floor is now open for questions, comments, live or oh, Max, could you solicit more feedback through the Twitter feed?
Yeah, all night long?
just now, before we, and then we'll get started.
Yeah.
Using hashtag #BarGradCenterTV.
Okay, would you like to show me how, not as digitally savvy, okay? Okay, so what do I have to do?
We're very excited because we got our first Twitter question a few lectures ago, so we're working on this new technology that's slow to arrive. So what's your question here?
Taff, please.
So, with presumably smelted the gold, yes.
Quite
Anyway,
certainly.
was there's no reference to that? Because the Versailles smelting was sort of a big thing, everyone remarked on it. There's no, this would have been.
I really looked through the archives. They are not as ordered as the Archiv National, the Minutie Centrale in Munich, but there is no more mention of this chalice, which must have been the most astonishing piece of 18th century French silver or gold, especially in Germany. No, it's simply gone, and of course, I mean.
Is there any way of calculating the relative difference between the weight in gold and the cost of the weight in gold versus a German at the moment?
Yes.
Would it have been more the weight in gold than the?
Well, I mean, his advance payment, for instance, the 3,000 livres, he was terribly expensive. I mean, I tried to point that out, reading the weight, the gold mark, but then, the extra cost of the design and going through this commission, it really tells us, and quite rightly so, that such artwork should be well paid. One should pay one's artists, but he was terribly expensive.
I mean, in the end, how much totally did go out was 18 or something. I was trying to.
The whole negotiated price, including the wage, was 18,000 livres. Yeah.
Two questions actually. How many ounces English is a mark of gold? Can you?
Yeah, let's refer this question to Tessa Murdoch.
Thank you. I was going to ask you another question actually. I'm afraid I don't have that answer up my sleeve, but I'm sure it can be provided.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe by a Twitter user.
Yeah. Come in, Twitter user.
Hello.
The second more general question is, did the Elector bring back with him to Germany French craftsmen in, not necessarily goldsmiths, but even East and?
He returned with, I believe, 80 voitures, carriages of works of art, argenterie, We have heard about this ivory turner who was trained in Paris in the very fashionable technique of gold decay, and there were many other architects. For instance, the architect Joseph Effner was trained, but the most important artist is probably Françoise, the famed designer and architect and interior designer who got a grant to study architecture in Paris, and the grant was paid by Emanuel. So this was a very successful way of endowing the newly court with the most fashionable or the best and most progressive appearance and character. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the three female caryatid figures, and I take your point that they are very apparently sensual. But I wonder if they were actually intended to represent the theological virtues. Is that really an angel's wing? Or are there attributes of faith, hope, and charity?
Germain in his legend, which I have not read out because I didn't want to torture you with all these records, he describes them as angels, and in the inventory of 1765 they're also named angels. But quite right, why not assume? I mean, given the fact that this is a commission to the Archbishop of Cologne,
I think you will find that there is a tradition of using theological virtues in that sort of caryatid role. So it may be, as it were, a quotation, even if not fully realised.
Absolutely, I totally could imagine that.
While you have that image there, I wonder whether I correctly saw that it's a cutout glued on a new page, except for the area which is in between the arms of the three angels or virtues. Is that correct or not? Because I wonder then, is there a direct link between the top part and the lower part, other than through the arms?
Well, I mean, you mean technically?
Technically,
You actually have a detail that shows that better at some point.
the question is the following.
Perhaps there.
If you're talking about yes,
Yeah.
because if you're talking about a composition of three statuettes linked together, I think you should refer to sculpture in the tradition of John Bologna, in the sense of organizing something which has its viewability in inverted commas all round, and also in the tradition of having something which will be stable in itself. I mean, to say that it will stand on its feet. Now, of course, there is not much projection happening outside of the baluster-shaped three figures together. But nevertheless, the idea that you're giving that is then also shown in the image by Largillière in the background piece. And in that respect, I wonder whether there is some link to either collecting that sort of bronze in Paris at the time, or possibly even the collection of Max Emanuel, or some other link. But I think that the going back to that sort of tradition is just as important as trying to make a stylistic analysis of the type we go from the Régence to the more fluttery Rococo, because I don't see the connection there in the absolute sense, because sculpture is not about C's and S's. So applying the systematic terminology of the decorative art to that sort of work makes no sense.
I think it's very important for an artisan or an artist like Germain to found his design in a tradition, and the three Tillmanns refer to an antique model, most definitely. Of course, sculpture in the decorative arts is a big theme, and I remember the beautiful exhibition that the Getty and and taking shape, and some, I believe, Leeds organized a couple of years ago, and this endows the decorative arts with the quality of sculpture, but actually the exhibition argued, and I agree to a certain extent, that objects of utility who are pieces of sculpture are actually more sophisticated or even smarter because you use these small sculptures. And there's an essay of, I believe, Mimi Hellman on that issue, which I can recommend. Gian de Bologna, Figura Serpentinata, I'm not sure whether that really would work here. Germain is, as a silversmith, known as a very, I would say, matter-of-fact sculptor. Also the life castings he does of, for instance, Machine d'Argent in the Getty, they're pretty matter-of-fact, just like, a still life in silver. So the, let's say, mannerist or overly illusionist designs were probably not his style, and therefore I wouldn't see Gian Bologna.
I don't mean specifically
Yeah,
Bologna,
but
the idea that sculpture is about getting the right balance. And this becomes even more important when the figure here, with three figures, holds something bigger above them. So then that is a play on that. Is that one of the earliest cases where you get that sort of peculiar link between the top and the...
Well, I showed you the urn for Henry II, and there the graces have not their arms up, but it's the same function. It's a container which is supported by three figures, and this came to my mind, but I'm sure there are more analogies.
Did you look at some of the torchères from the Mobilier d'Argent at Versailles? Because I don't remember how many figures are involved. They're certainly designed for at least one that are very similar, trumpet-shaped
Absolutely
stand
true.
above it for a giardino.
Yes, absolutely true. That comes to mind immediately also, and must have been present to the contemporaries.
Can I jump in and come back maybe to some of the bigger questions in a way about geopolitics and style and how they overlap? I mean, you in your abstract for this talk, you mentioned the kind of incredible trajectory of this man's life, who's bouncing back and forth in a way between different poles of Europe and in a way buffeted by the winds of war and all of this. So I'm just wondering, to what extent, in your view, does his taste show a kind of a personal project, and to what extent, in all this movement, is there the signs of a kind of it's premature to call it a national project, but I'm just thinking in a way of Tobias Locker's talk about Frederick the Great, and I wonder if you could put that into the broader context. And then I have to put into this a question that's just come from a student actually who's going to be joining our MA program next fall, who writes from Portland, Oregon. Although Robert Ducotte's designs for Schleißheim weren't executed, how can French palace design be seen in Bavarian 18th century palaces? So a related question.
Yeah, I think that is a fundamental question. If you analyze princely commissions, what is status, what is needed by any event, costly materials, silver, to reflect the prominence and the importance of the court, but to have taste, to be a connoisseur, that is something which is not necessarily related to princely function. And I believe Max Emanuel was a case like the Augustuses in Dresden, who were great connoisseurs and used their means to build up a most important heritage. I think here in in the commission of the chalice, it's very interesting to look at the first design and the way I have interpreted it, because that probably would be the grand goût that a French artist thought appropriate for a prince, but it was rejected, and by two princes who were connoisseurs, who practice art, who have written a lot on their engagement with collecting. So I think here there is really a personal taste to be perceived in the second chalice, and I am always and still astonished at the sensuality of this second design. And you have to imagine the Elector Joseph Clement in the choir of Cologne Cathedral and celebrating Mass with such a design.
This object is very valuable, but it's this high, right? So it's a tiny object with an intimate, seen by very few people.
But it's not tiny.
Well, how high could it have been? Am I wrong? I'm just trying to connect it in a sense to a question about the palace, right? Which is a very public statement, visible to.
So it's about 45.
Okay, but nonetheless, it remains kind of a personal use object in some ways. And I'm just wondering how it obviously became a kind of affair of state because it took so bloody long to make. But I wonder if, how do we put that in relationship to projects that he himself mentioned? I can build French-style palaces.
If you go to Frederick's collection, which is something of interest here, I think, you have someone who had similar means and who had similar access. But in Frederick's case, he knew where his personal taste was, and he knew where his court taste needed to go, and he built two different things. So he made, for his personal taste, wants to see, and he filled it with the French art that he knows cared about, and he had Voltaire, and he had various people. But then he built the Gamilde Gallery, and he filled that with what he thought of as appropriate kingly motifs. And as he built the Neue Palais, he had French artists, but they are grandiose statements, those paintings, and they're not the intimate. And he knew the difference. So, and that's way bigger than those. I mean, so
that's what I'm getting at, yeah.
Yes, yeah, I see that.
I have an answer to both of your questions. In the 1720s, it's clear, as Max Emanuel wrote to his former architect in Italy, he wanted certi ornamenti alla francese, that the whole of Europe wanted. But looking at, let's say, the artistic capacity of a collector is to look for something that is artistic but probably unfashionable. And I have an answer in terms of the painting collection at Schleißheim, for instance, which is quite astonishing. He made his Grand Galerie the public sphere for the courtyards. He turned it into a painting gallery. Louis XIV exhibited mirrors, French technology. Max Emanuel exhibited his old master collections, which were, according to the taste of the Academy, the categories Venetian painting and the great French masters. But in his small private cabinet next to his state bedroom, he amassed about 350 Netherlandish genre pieces, about 20 brouwers, which are still amazing brouwers in Munich. The most important one was later sold to the National Gallery, the big brouwer in the National Gallery called Terracine. Actually, it's a brother, came from Max Emanuel. So to collect, for instance, brouwers at the time was something Louis XIV despised, the Dutch dirt, if you like. And I think looking at artistic qualities which were not necessarily fashion is something which can tell us something about how personal being collected. And I think it's very important to differentiate between public and private taste. And you can do that with him, you can do that with Frederick the Great, and you can do that with most of the interesting princely collectors, I believe.
Could I go back once more to the iconography of the chalice?
Yes.
Because I think it's directly linked with the scene at the Mount of Olives, where Christ is saying, take this cup from me. And what you're getting is this amazing interpretation of three angels almost levitating the cup. So that there's a direct link, I think, between the relief and those figures that are definitely angels.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
One last comment?
a question about turning machines?
Well, it's so fabulously ornamented. Was this something that he would do to a kind of in front of an audience, or was it a private pursuit? I mean, the machine, the layout itself that you showed with the sort of decorated handles.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a common. I've seen machines like this. So I'm thinking of actually the actual lathe.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about his actual practice? Whether it was something where he did it in front of, whether it was a kind of performance? I'm just thinking about the mounts on the machine, how beautiful they are, and how it speaks a kind of theatricality of this.
Absolutely. I think
activity.
this lathe is a statement. It's almost a monument. It's got beautiful Oromulu coat of arms. And I read out the quote from the Grand Cabinet, which I think is simply marvelous, because of course this was published by the travel writer, and the whole of Europe should become aware of the capacity of a prince as an artist. So that was his image, warrior and connoisseur and collector, so definitely. And then also you were to come up with the idea, you go to Compiègne, you find out there is a relic that Henriette Marie brought from England. His great aunt, by the way, because his grandmother is Christine de Savoie, who is a sister of Henriette Marie family as well. But then, to put the new machine to the test, and within the public of all these noble sisters, a lot of acclaim to present that at his little court in the French province. It really tells us that this was leisure made public. I think is quite obvious.
Just a small technical question. What is marbre à l'anglaise? Does that refer to the shape of the material?
Marbre à l'anglaise.
You have it there. The third line.
Good point. Back to Tessa.
Oh, thank you.
What
Shall I offer you Plymouth? It's not terribly glamorous.
could it have been
There's lots of public marble.
marble? Or I understand there is actually English marble, no?
Oh, yes,
Yes,
there
public
is.
marble.
Yeah. More than one.
More than one. So I believe it should.
I think it's the cheminée.
It's the
shape of the cheminée.
It's a design, I would assume.
Ah, L'Angloise. I think you're right. I think it's a description of the type mantelpiece.
Yeah. And what could it maybe back à la Marot, because he was associated with William III, who was a close friend of Max Emanuel.
Is it supposed to be à l'angle? No, I mean,
That's the
is there a
way-
kind of pun?
Always to be expected. No?
Yeah, but I mean, Angloise.
I mean, I believe just like you, it really refers to the design, but and one would
Is there a suggestion there that the chimney piece is being used to display some of those treasures? In which case, the idea of a tiered corner chimney piece, a la Marrow,
Yeah,
fits.
that would be quite believable, I think. And because there was a lot of artwork in this Grand Cabinet, the sculpture,
It provides another platform for the
yeah,
collection.
a little private museum, as you like, if you like. Mhm.
Are there any views of the room in question?
The room still exists. The first northern pavilion of Nymphenburg, which is the representative sphere of the Duke Francis of Bavaria. It's unfortunately not public, but the interiors are astonishing, and they, for instance, this is the Grand Cabinet in the private apartment on the third floor, but on the second floor. The first floor there is another great Grand Cabinet with cheminée, which was designed by Perrin the Younger and executed by the brothers Slots in 1719. And probably some of you know it. You can Google it. It's most amazing. It was I don't know, shipped or brought to Munich, in the private apartment, the ground plan is still original. There's a beautiful boiserie paneling à la Capucine, not gilt, for a private apartment. And there is a room that must have been that working space, but one rarely gets there. You need an invitation. I've seen it once.
Can you get us one?
Let's try.
Anyway, Max, thank you. You've really brought, I think, this figure to life for us. So my last question is, are you in fact named after Max? How do you come to this?
Well, I'm from the Rhineland, and as you know, Wittelsbachs were pretty popular there as well, so maybe there's a connection. No Bavarian, I'm afraid.
Anyway, I think you've done a great job, with this one, which really looks backward, I think, for us in many ways. We think of 16th, 17th century traditions, we see an object like this, and you've taken us right up into the, as you say, the avant-garde of the 18th century. So we thank you very much for a rich presentation, and I invite you all to join us